So passive speakers or active speakers, which one should you get? If you're looking at buying new speakers for your new system, or if you've had trouble with passive or active, we're going to talk today about some of the differences, some of the bonuses, and some of the downsides to having both types of systems. So yeah, stay tuned. Jumping right into passive speakers, what are some of the advantages of going passive? So passive meaning that the amplifier is needed to be provided separate from the actual speaker. And so what does that mean for the most part? It means that there'll be one cable coming out of your amplifier to your speaker, and that cable is typically going to be a really thick, heavy-duty 12-gauge wire like this one. This is the most traditional type of connection, the speak-on cable. Of course, you're going to encounter many other types on especially older devices. You're going to see banana plugs, 1/4 inch, but that's the one you want if you're going to go with passive. So what are the advantages? That's one. You have one wire going to your driver, which means that if you've got a long run and you've got a speaker that you need to throw out real far away, you don't have to worry about sending power and sending data. You can just have one cable do everything. So that's great. Another advantage is going to be, because they're separated, the versatility. You can run many different speakers with many different amp combinations to suit your needs. So depending on your rig, you can see my rig over here is multiple types of speakers, 3 ways, 2 ways, lots of different subs. So I've got lots of different type of speakers for different use case scenarios. And so that's an advantage of passive, is that you can combine different setups and form different types of setups, whether you're doing it for PA for a band or for DJ or what have you. So yeah. Another thing that's highly advantageous of passive is going to be troubleshooting and repair, of course, because if you're out on a gig and your speaker's not making noise, you can try another amp. If the amp doesn't work, you can try another cable. If that doesn't work, you can try another speaker, and then you can figure out by deduction what is it that is failing. Whereas opposed to an active speaker like this one, if this stops working, it's going to be really difficult for you to figure out whether it's the driver, whether it's the amplifier, whether it's power, whether it's signal, just because all of it's in one box, and you won't, you can't, unless you take it apart, you won't know. So that's a huge downside to powered speakers. But on the passive side, on the fly troubleshooting, great, but also repairability, so much better, simply for the same reasons that once you do figure out what's the problem, you can easily replace a speaker, you can easily replace an amplifier, and you can even continue your gig most of the times, which is really awesome. Now, the biggest advantage by far has got to be the fact that you can choose your own driver, so you can choose the type of sound you want, customization, different types of speakers and drivers, different boxes. You can make your own box. But also on the amplifier side, the most important, the most crucial thing for me is the fact that you can get an amplifier with digital sound processing, which means that this amplifier has a built-in limiter, built-in compressor, built-in crossover, built-in everything I could possibly need in order to drive a speaker and not ruin it. So it's been my experience that a good amp will never blow up a good speaker. That's just my experience for the most part. It's very difficult to make this thing go louder than you want to. It will just cap you off at a certain dB that you set it to. Where I know that there's a lot of powered speakers that offer the same features, like this one has a crossover. Like you can see here, it's got a crossover. It's got a simple protect light. It's got a clip light. You can choose. You got some basic features on here, but for whatever reason, it's my experience that even though these things are advertised as having a limiter or a crossover, for the most part, most active speakers do not, and they can blow up if you go too far. So that's something to keep in mind for sure. Also, similar to how active speakers are advertised incorrectly, and most of the time it's hard to find one with a limiter, the same is said for passive speakers. it's very difficult to find any that are lightweight. So you've really got to do some hunting, and you've really got to spend money if you want to get a passive speaker that has neodymium drivers that is lightweight, similar to an active speaker. For the most part, most active speakers are going to be made of plastic. They're going to have neodymium drivers. They're going to be lightweight, and they're going to be easier to haul around. That's not always the case, but it's mostly the case. Whereas on passive speakers, for whatever reason, most manufacturers are making these things out of heavy wood. They're not really thinking about, people buying these for mobility purposes. That being said, amplifiers that have DSP settings and built-in sound processing like this that are dedicated for amplifying are gonna be stronger, last longer, especially if you buy something made in the USA. But that's not to say that some powered speakers don't have similar amplifiers installed inside of them. Like, for example, QSC for a long time had made by Crown internal amplifiers. So you've really got to do some digging to see if there are any that are really reliable. So on the active speaker side, what are the downsides? One of the first downsides you'll encounter is that you need to run audio signal and you've got to run power to the same driver. That most of the time works against you, but sometimes can work with you if the speaker, say for example, is way on the other side of the room, but there happens to be another outlet out there. That does mean you still have to run XLR though, which I know XLRs, the longer you run them, the less reliable they are. So I'd much rather run a long speak-on cable, I know, to be more reliable than a long XLR cable. But that's just me. Maybe it's my personal experience that, those fail more often, but I feel like they do, especially because they're low voltage. And similar to this problem that active speakers have, also, obviously, repair is difficult. And you can see here, I've used passive speakers for a very long time, and in a course of like 10 years, I've only ever had maybe 2 failures, and they were not by me. They were because I rented them to someone who didn't know what they were doing. In this case, here's a set of active subwoofers that I got that are brand new from Carvin. These are 18-inch powered subs, and both of them blew out. And upon further inspection, you can see that the MOSFET chip completely went out. And so then the driver went out as a consequence of that. And so now I've got basically duds sitting here that are brand new from Carvin. And repairing them is going to be a huge hassle because I've got to go to Carvin in order to get this amp module, which they already explained to me that they don't have in stock, and they never carry any parts as far as support goes. Same problems you're going to encounter no matter what brand you go with. QSC, repairs are going to be difficult just because of the proprietary components. So that's definitely the biggest downside. But how did this happen? I can tell you that it happened because when I was using these, I stepped out for like an hour or two, and I wasn't watching the level, and of course somebody really cranked these things way up, and what ended up happening was it clipped, and so at some point there was just too much juice and it went beyond the peak. The amplifier failed, and as the amplifier failed and this chip failed, everything became fried. The driver failed. Everything failed essentially. So it was just like a terrible catastrophe. And I couldn't continue my gig because I couldn't replace the amp on the spot. And I didn't have any other subs in my truck. So we had to do the gig without any subs, which was a terrible night. That being said, why would anyone buy an active subwoofer then if they are so unreliable? There are people out there that say they have good experiences, and I'm going to let you guys judge because, it's my anecdote from owning so many passive speakers and having very little problems, and owning active speakers on this new setup I have, tops and bottoms, and realizing, having this issue right away, plus many of my friends having problems with EVs, ZLXs, QSC K12s, basically Mackeys, every brand you can think of, I've seen them go. So there's that, but this is, again, my anecdotal experience. I would like to see some data on, what is the failure rate for some of this active stuff. That would be interesting to know. So that's another thing. So what are the advantages? Why would anyone get this, right? So I can't think of anything beyond it being easy to set up. It requires very little knowledge. right? All you do is plug it in and it goes. So that's got to be the main reason. The second reason is that you don't need to carry an amp, right? So it's just the box. So that's the second reason. That's got to be the second reason for sure. Less connections and things like this. And I want to say that also it's better for manufacturers. Maybe they make more money doing it this way, simply because they can cheap out on the components. They can have such a tiny little amplifier like this one inside of a big speaker like this and advertise it as, 700 watts RMS, which is probably very difficult to believe that amount of power is coming from this tiny amp. You know what I mean? But, they're going to say that that's what it is, and there's no way for you to prove it. And so then that leaves the last but not least, the sound test, right? Are they any louder than passive speakers? Let's give these two a try and see what they sound like. So I've got my MacBook with Serato. I got this little Akai mixer that's playing out to both the sub here and this amplifier and sub. So right now you're listening to the powered sub, which is putting out, I want to say, some pretty good volume. Here, let's go to the beginning. So I'm really gonna drive it home. Let's see if we can make it clip. There it is. So at full volume it clipped. So now let's switch over to our passive speaker. Keep in mind these are different types of drivers. This is an 18 and this is a 2x12. I also have the 18 version of this. I'm just too lazy to get it out of the pile. But let's listen to this setup and see what it sounds like. Oh, way more bass. Cool. Well, let's try and make it clip. The thing about this amp is that I know it won't clip no matter what I do. Beautiful. So yeah, in summary, it's up to you to choose. But I mean, I'm being a hater right now just because of all this I gotta deal with here and trying to repair these things. I'm on the passive sound kind of guy. I'm on that boat over there. But you guys let me know what you think. Are there, what are your experiences with active speakers? What are your experiences with passive speakers? Let me know. Is anyone even still on passive? I feel like I'm one of the only guys out here. But yeah, man, this is DJ OCCULT back at you. Peace.